Have you ever walked into a place expecting warmth, acceptance, and community, only to feel like an outsider? For many, that place is the modern church. Churches are meant to be sanctuaries, places of love, support, and guidance. Yet for some of us, they've become something quite different. As chosen ones, we're gifted with discernment. We can sense things most others might overlook: a shift in energy, a disingenuous smile, or the subtle unease in a room. It's why many of us feel alienated in today's church environment. We walk in with open hearts, yearning for connection, but instead, we're met with cold stares, whispered judgments, and a feeling that we just don't belong. But let me be clear, this isn't about abandoning faith. It's about reclaiming it, worshiping on our own terms, in our own space. Because let's face it, something's gone awry in organized religion. If this resonates with you, stay tuned and make sure to like and subscribe. Together, we'll explore why so many people are choosing to worship alone and how we can find our way back to what really matters. At its core, the church is meant to be a place where people can find support, love, and direction. It's not just a building or an organization. It's a living society based on the teachings of God and the love of Christ. The church's job is to offer comfort in times of trouble, support in times of doubt, and direction in managing the spiritual and moral complexities of life. It's a safe place where people can find strength and hope, based on their religion and a sense of purpose. It is important for a church to accept everyone with open arms, just like Jesus Christ did. The church should show the same kind of unconditional love that Christ showed to the tax collector, the sinner, and the outcast. In this place, differences in background, standing, or situation don't matter, because everyone shares the same faith. Being warm and welcoming to strangers creates a sense of belonging that is important for spiritual growth and building communities. Also, the church should be a safe place where people feel like they fit and are accepted, a place to get away from the harsh world. People go to church to find peace, get better, and connect with others. It should be a place where people feel safe talking about their problems, fears, and questions without fear of being judged. It takes more than open doors to make this kind of setting. It takes open hearts as well. Leaders and members must both work to build connections, show empathy, and break down any barriers that could make someone feel left out or unwelcome. People need to feel like they belong, and the church can help them in a special way. The church makes a safe place for people to grow spiritually and emotionally through fellowship, shared prayer, and acts of service. Acceptance doesn't mean putting up with all kinds of behavior. Instead, it means loving people just the way they are and leading them to Christ's transforming grace. The church has a unique chance to be a source of hope and togetherness in a world that is often divided, lonely, and violent. The church does its job as the body of Christ by doing what it's supposed to do, which is to support, love, and guide people. People grow in their faith, lives are changed, and communities are made stronger. Then the church will really show what God is like. Many Christians are becoming more and more unhappy with their churches. The church is supposed to be a place of faith and community, but many people leave feeling emotionally empty and disconnected. Some people leave traditional congregations to serve God alone because they want a deeper, more personal relationship with God, without the problems they see in organized religion. One of the main reasons for this disappointment is that many people feel spiritually disconnected from their church groups. For some people, the church doesn't give them the food and direction they need. They don't find an atmosphere of togetherness and God's presence. Instead, they are surrounded by rigid structures, cliques, and shallow interactions that don't feel real. People who worship can feel alone after these kinds of events, like their spiritual needs are less important than customs, social norms, or social expectations. People who are really looking for the truth often don't feel welcome in churches. People who are new to religion or who are coming back to it may face judgmental looks, cold stares, or an unspoken expectation to fit in with the norms that are already in place. People who act in this way can make it hard for others to feel accepted or respected. If a church cares more about how it looks, denominational rules, or internal politics than real relationship, it's not doing its job and could turn off the people it's supposed to serve. Different people see and react to these flaws in very different ways, depending on their level of discernment. People who are very spiritually sensitive can often tell when someone is lying or not being honest in church groups. They might be able to tell when worship is just a show, when leadership is only interested in themselves, or when the congregation puts custom ahead of truth. This knowledge is helpful, but it can be discouraging to go to church because it shows how far the church has to go to reach its full potential. Because of these things, a lot of Christians have chosen to worship on their own, wanting a pure connection with God that isn't tainted by human flaws. Individual prayer can be satisfying, but it also shows a worrying trend. People are losing faith in the very thing that is supposed to bring people together and build faith. This disappointment makes churches think about what they can do to improve. Churches can rebuild trust and make places where everyone feels welcome and spiritually fulfilled by embracing honesty, openness, and values that are based on Christ. Pretend or leaving people out can't stop the church from doing its job. It needs to rise to meet the needs of a world that is looking. Some people say that modern church practices put organized religion and customs ahead of Jesus Christ's teachings. There are a lot of traditions and practices in many churches that may take away from the main message of the gospel, which is love, grace, and salvation. These habits can make faith feel stiff and formulaic, turning what should be a spiritual experience into a mechanical exercise. They don't help build a strong bond with Christ. If you put too much stress on tradition, you might turn off believers who want to connect with God in a real way, instead of following rules made by people. The fact that church politics and cliquish behavior are so common is one of the worst things about how churches work now. These internal factors can make the group less welcoming to new members by causing disagreements. Longtime members often form close-knit groups that newbies find impossible to get into, making them feel unwelcome or undervalued. It's possible for leadership jobs to become more about power and influence than about service. This can make people more competitive instead of humble and willing to work together. These actions are very different from how Jesus led as a servant, where humility and kindness were most important. Cold relationships and judgmental attitudes make the problem even worse and make people feel left out instead of included. Visitors or new members may get strange looks, judgmental whispers, or just plain lack of interest. Instead of being welcomed with open arms and love, they are met with formalities and suspicion. People find it hard to feel accepted or appreciated when they don't have real connections with others. This makes many people think that the church cares more about keeping up appearances than following Christ's call to love everyone no matter what. These complaints bring up an important point. Many churches have lost sight of their goal to follow Christ's teachings. Jesus taught with kindness and a sense of humility, and he accepted sinners and outcasts. The modern church, on the other hand, seems to care more about keeping its organizations alive than meeting the spiritual and emotional needs of its members. Churches need to rethink their goals in order to deal with these problems. They should get back to Christ's message, breaking down barriers of custom and cliques to make real connections. It is possible for a church to be a real light in the world if it puts love, acceptance, and humility ahead of politics, traditions, and judgment. This is the only way it can show what Jesus is like and bring people closer to him. One problem that many churches have right now is that some longtime members and leaders act and think in ways that make it hard for new people to join. These people may think they are the most important people in their group, so they sometimes act like they are better than everyone else. New people may find it hard to feel welcome or appreciated when everyone else feels like they are better than them. Instead of being welcomed with open arms and support, newbies often face cliques, cold interactions, or a subtle feeling of being left out, which makes them less likely to get involved and grow in the church community. Leadership in the church is also a big part of how spiritual growth happens or doesn't happen. Sadly, there are times when leaders lack the drive or skills to properly guide new followers. The people who should be in charge should be humble, dedicated, and want to make followers. However, some leaders get comfortable in their jobs and see them as nothing more than everyday tasks, not holy callings. Others may be too busy with paperwork or keeping rituals alive to really care about their congregation's spiritual needs. Because of this, new Christians don't have the mentoring and direction they need to grow in their faith. A widespread belief in the status quo makes these problems even worse. A lot of leaders and members who have been there for a long time don't like change. They'd rather have the security of known routines and social interactions than the uncertainty of growth and transformation. The church can't build a vibrant, welcoming society because people are afraid to accept new ideas and different points of view. Newcomers often pick up on this rigidity and see the church as an exclusive club instead of an open body of Christ. This makes the church feel stuck and inaccessible to people who are looking for spiritual help and connection. This worries me a lot right now, when people are looking for meaning and hope in the middle of life's problems. If churches don't deal with these problems, they could lose people and become less important in the community as a whole. Long-term members and leaders need to be humble and willing to serve in order to address these issues. They need to know that their job is to help spiritual growth, not stop it. Churches need to actively promote openness, create a culture of mentoring, and be open to new ideas without breaking biblical principles. By doing this, they can make a place where everyone, new and old, feels encouraged to grow in their faith and make a real contribution to the body of Christ. While modernizing Christianity is sometimes a good thing, it often runs the risk of watering down its core beliefs. Some churches try to fit in with modern society by doing things, or teaching things that go against the timeless truths of the gospel. When people try to make Christianity relevant, the word can get watered down, putting comfort and acceptance ahead of conviction and change. The gospel needs to be shared in ways that modern people can understand, but its main message, about turning away from sin and being saved, should not change. To have true faith, you have to be completely committed, not just some of the time. Christianity isn't like a menu where you can pick and choose the parts that are easiest for you or fit your culture while ignoring the rest. To follow Christ, you have to give up everything and accept all of His word, even if it goes against what society thinks is right or what you want. Making changes to faith to fit people's needs takes away from its power to change lives and lead believers to spiritual growth. Authentic Christianity requires a commitment that goes beyond changes in culture and stays rooted in the Bible and its ideals. One of the most worrying things about modernization is how it puts too much stress on money and gifts and not enough on spiritual guidance. Some churches put a lot of emphasis on giving money, giving the idea that wealth is a sign of how faithful someone is or how well known they are in the community. Focusing on material gifts can push away people who are having a hard time with money and take away from the spiritual growth that the church is supposed to offer. Giving tithes and offerings is a good way to keep service going, but it should never be the main message. The church's job is to care for people, not to make money. Focusing too much on modernization and making money takes away from what Christianity is all about. having a personal connection with God through faith, service, and love. The church must fight the desire to give in to societal pressures that value ease of access, material wealth, or popularity over spiritual depth. Instead, it should stick to defending biblical truths, encouraging real worship, and giving Christians the tools they need to live their faith in a real way. The church needs to be creative in how it interacts with the world today because of problems, but this should never come at the cost of its base. By staying true to its core beliefs, Christianity can always be a force that changes people's lives and the lives of whole communities. A rising worry is that fewer and fewer people are going to church, which should be a place of spiritual nourishment and community for them. People think that churches often work more like private clubs than friendly groups, which is a big reason for this drop. Longtime members may form cliques, making the group feel closed off and unwelcoming to new people. Some guests are met with cold faces and closed doors instead of open arms and warmth. They may feel like they have to earn their place in the congregation. People who are looking for a spiritual home feel left out because the church doesn't include everyone. This makes people think that the church is only for a chosen few. A lot of people leave the church because they don't find the love, support, or direction they were hoping for. Jesus' teachings stress kindness, acceptance, and unity, but these ideals aren't always clear in how people in the church interact with each other. People who are new to religion often look for a place where they can be open, ask questions, and find comfort in their faith journey. Instead, they see cold looks, shallow relationships, or a focus on custom over connection, which makes them less likely to want to stay. A lot of people go to church to feel like they belong and to experience the love of Christ. If these needs aren't met, they become disillusioned and decide to leave. Disappointment can also come from not getting what you want from a spiritual relationship. An awful lot of people go to church hoping to have a meaningful experience with God, but when they leave, they feel emotionally empty. It's possible for sermons to lack inspiration, worship routines to become boring, and leadership to seem uninterested in the problems of the community. For some, going to church doesn't have the life-changing power they're looking for, which makes them wonder what role it plays in their lives. This lack of connection is a sign of a bigger problem. Church groups aren't putting relationships and being real first. The church loses its purpose when events, traditions, or financial goals come before making real connections. To stop this from happening, churches need to make it a point to create spaces that reflect Christ's love and acceptance. This means getting rid of cliques, genuinely accepting everyone, and meeting each person's spiritual and emotional needs. Churches can rebuild trust and faith by focusing on real relationships and meaningful worship. This way, no one will feel like an outsider in God's place. The church is at a crossroads and needs to make a clear change to better show how Jesus loved everyone. Elders, leaders, and members who have been there for a long time need to get out of their comfort zones and help welcome new people. Too often, church organizations become closed off, with leaders and longtime members forming close-knit groups that leave newcomers out, sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident. We need to change this situation. Leaders are not only supposed to uphold customs, but they should also show Christ's humility and servant-heartedness by reaching out to everyone and making them feel like they belong. At its heart, the church should show the love of Jesus by welcoming people from all walks of life. During his ministry, Jesus went out to tax collectors, sinners, the poor, and people who were looked down upon. He did this to show that God's love has no limits. Still, there are still hurdles to inclusion in many modern churches. These can show up as harsh judgment, strict adherence to customs, or an unspoken need for people to fit in before they are fully accepted. These actions go against the word of the gospel and turn off the people who need the church's hope and healing the most. For change to have an impact, it's important to break down barriers like judgment, custom, and exclusivity. People who are judgmental, whether they are saying it out loud or not, keep seekers and new believers from joining the church group. Traditions are good in some situations, but they should never get in the way of giving God's love. When customs are rigid, they can turn off people who don't know them or who worship in a different way. Similarly, exclusivity, whether it comes from cliques or a feeling of superiority among longtime members, gets in the way of growth and togetherness. These barriers need to be taken down by the church, which should welcome everyone without any doubt or bias. This plea for change isn't just to stay alive, it's also to come back to life. It's a chance for the church to get back to its roots as a lively, friendly group that shows God's kingdom. Leaders and elders need to show others how to build real relationships and put love over custom. Getting rid of barriers to inclusion and actively accepting everyone, the church can become a light of hope in a broken and hurting world, showing how Christ's love can change things. Now is the time to make a change. Being wise and responsible are very important for the church's health and purpose. People who really follow Christ are expected to have spiritual insight and be able to tell when the church goes against what Christ taught. To do this, Christians must stay rooted in the Bible and compare the actions, teachings, and culture of their church group to what Jesus did. Spiritually aware members of the church often feel disconnected when the focus shifts from living out the gospel to institutional traditions, personal goals, or how the church looks. Their knowledge is a very important warning sign that makes people need to think about things and change their plans. Criticism for the sake of criticism is not discernment. Discernment is about finding the truth and making sure the church stays a light in the world. A wise follower of Christ looks past how someone looks on the outside and finds behaviors or habits that could hinder spiritual growth or lie about what Christ wants. Discernment helps the church figure out where it needs to go back to its biblical roots, whether it's because of too much focus on material wealth, not enough real outreach, or leadership that puts power over service. Just as important is that church leaders are responsible for what they do. It is very important for leaders to lead their followers in an honest and humble way. But when leaders are pushed by their own egos, it can create unhealthy situations where personal goals are more important than the spiritual growth of the group. Leaders should always think about why they do what they do and make sure it's not for personal gain or attention, but to honor God and help others. Being authentic means being honest as a leader, owning up to your mistakes, and showing that you care about the well-being of the church group. Another important trait for good leadership is humility. Leaders are expected to serve others instead of being helped, just like Jesus did with his disciples. They should avoid the urge to use their power for their own benefit and instead work to make sure that everyone feels valued and supported. For this to happen, people need to stop thinking in terms of levels and start following the biblical concept of love and submission to each other. To keep the church's integrity, both members who use their heads and leaders who are responsible work together. They work together to keep the church in line with what Christ taught, creating a place where honesty, humility, and spiritual growth can grow. In a world that needs truth and hope, this unity is important for the church to do its job. As we close, I want to leave you with this thought. Faith is not about fitting into someone else's idea of what a believer should be. It's about walking your own path, guided by the love and grace of God. And whether that path leads you to a church or a quiet corner of your home, know that you are not alone. You are chosen, you are loved, and you are enough. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Together, we can navigate this journey of faith, one step at a time.